and welcome to The Author's Journey. I'm your host, Mony Dojeiji, and I'm delighted to have with me today an author who is very well known in this community. He is a Zen teacher, he's a spiritual warrior, he's a peace activist, so many more titles that we can add on to his name, but today he's with me to talk about his journey as an author. Please help me welcome Dr. Ian Prattis. It's so nice to see you.
My pleasure.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
So tell me, Ian, tell me a little bit about your story and how you just came to be an author and to come down this whole writing journey.
I think it really started when in my teens. I went to the Far East, Sarawak in Borneo.
In Borneo, oh
and,
wow.
The vivid, verdant landscape and the different peoples and so on. I used to scribble everything down, so poetry and notes, and that stuck with me. So wherever I went, whether it was my yogi years in India, okay, I just wrote everything down. And with my training with First Nations mentors in Canada and also in the States, I kept a really good log. So I had suitcases full of journals.
I love that. I have a visual of my mind. As a matter of fact, yes. It was just a big suitcase filled with diaries.
So that's how it started. I wanted to relate to what I was seeing and feeling and thinking, and sometimes the rereading was difficult because it was hard stuff.
As in hard emotionally, like you were working.
Hard emotionally.
Okay,
yes.
So you were capturing a lot of your feelings and your emotions,
right.
and okay.
That's right. And I think that allowed me to sculpt things in a very authentic way. I wasn't trying to sanitize my emotions, my thoughts. I was just putting it down as it was at that time. So, and I think this allowed me to be really authentic in what I would write. It didn't always work so well when I was a professor, when I had to produce textbooks and things like that, and
sure.
And so I really got the kickstart when I retired, because I had to learn to write in a less pompous way, no footlines or things like this. So I had to really change the way I wrote, and it was more me that started to come out.
Did you feel confident letting that real, authentic voice and that real you come through in your writings? Because a lot of authors struggle with that. They struggle with allowing their authentic voice, who they truly are, to really appear on paper. Did you have that struggle?
It wasn't a struggle.
Really?
It was just it took a while to kind of lurch out and start, and once I started, that was it.
So you've had a very rich history, and I would say it's your journeys. I would imagine you mentioned Borneo, you mentioned in passing India. How have your experiences shaped you as a writer?
I think they provided me with a huge spectrum of experience, and from that experience, and the lessons I'd learned from teachers in India, First Nations medicine people, I learned to be quiet within myself, and within that quietness, the authentic voice just rang clear. So I was also ready to hear other authentic voices from the past and things like that, because I was tuning into the fact that, okay, there's only one way I can write, and it's to be as authentic and as clear as I can, and to wait for that. I suppose it's like a ping, a ping of okay, the authentic stream is running. Now start writing.
And it's funny that you mentioned that ping. How do you know? How do you know when you're writing from that authentic place, and rather than writing, say, from your mind, from the intellect? And of course, we need the intellect to get the words done. But how do you know that when you've gotten that ping, and you know that you're in that place?
Well, let me tell you, I've tried to write the 2 or 3 pages a day, as some writers do, and it was garbage.
I love it.
And so I just wait You know, in the in between times, I do research and I edit and things like that.
Right.
But when I feel that sort of intuitive energy, you could call it a spiritual energy, I don't know. I don't write until that is running, and then I scribble like crazy, and keep on going until it lets up on me. So I wait. I'm very patient, and so sometimes it's difficult to read my writing, but I manage.
So is meditation a part of your way of being stillness?
Yes.
Because
yes.
I know you're a Zen teacher at
Yes.
the Pine Gate community, and you teach there this art of mindfulness. Can you explain what mindfulness is first?
Mindful is sort of being aware of the consequences of your thoughts and your actions, and sculpting them in such a way that they're kind and that they're beneficial. In a nutshell, that's what I do.
Well, it sounds so easy. Yes, it's and that in itself, I imagine, is a journey. Learning to be able to sculpt.
Yes, yes.
And how has that practice then impacted your writing? Do you use the practices that you have garnered from being a Zen teacher into your writing?
Especially so in the latest book, which is going to be coming out in October.
Yes.
It's called Our World is Burning. That is 16 essays on mindful engagement.
Yeah.
And this was a new genre for me.
Yeah.
And there I basically was pulling together the best of the essays I've written on mindful engagement and putting them together into a package to address the issue of our world is burning.
Yeah.
And what can we do about it? How can we engage and encourage young people as well as people in everyday life to push back against the unkindness, against the very horrible things happening, and also being awake to the realities of climate change, that it's not going to go away, so we have to learn how to adapt. So I'm also writing about how do we best adapt to the inevitable.
Yeah, and I like how, I mean, this book is not published yet. You mentioned it's not coming out until October. We don't even have a book cover yet. So we're talking about things that are hot off the press, so to speak.
That's right. Playing with a few possible front covers. We usually got a huge fiery, fiery image, but that hasn't yet been decided.
Okay, so this is a collection of essays that you
That's
mentioned,
right.
but you also have written across many other genres. You've written fiction. Do you write poetry as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you published your works of poetry?
Some of it's been published.
Yeah.
I've got a lot. That's not. It needs a bit of polish.
So then we have here some of your books. I want to talk to you a little bit about this book here that's sitting on the table, the trailing sky, six feathers. If we can get a shot of that for a second. And this is a book that I've read and that I enjoyed thoroughly. And I want to talk to you about this idea that many writers, I think, also deal with, and it's this idea of having a muse. Okay, who is your muse, and how did she impact what was happening in this book?
Well, first off, I didn't allow the muse to come through.
Oh, how interesting! Tell me about that. Why not?
Several decades ago, I had a distinct feeling that I was being stalked, that I had a stalker.
Okay.
And I'd feel this presence, I'd look behind me.
Yeah.
And it was when a very wise medicine woman told me that this was certainly no stalker. It was an Aboriginal medicine woman from the 18th century who was trying to come through to me so that I could receive gifts from her. And I was resistant, my kind of logical, intellectual mind.
Yes.
And I remained resistant until so many things were happening, and there's no other way to account for it. So eventually I did surrender.
Yeah.
It was basically a very wise, crystal clear energy that was impacting me.
Explain what you mean by that. What a crystal clear energy that was impacting you.
Oh, that was what was evolving in me by listening in to this particular muse.
And how did you listen to her? I'm trying to get you to articulate, if you can, what I know is often a feeling, because you know it's a feeling that is there. Sometimes you might feel it even as a presence. Sometimes it's words that come through and you don't understand. Where did these words come from? So how was it for you, this connection with your muse?
Well, I was taught by my mentor in Canada. This is a White Eagle woman.
Yes.
How to build a mental medicine wheel in my mind.
Okay.
And at the center, the sacred center, that was where I would communicate with this sacred stalker.
The sacred stalker. I like that.
I hope she forgives me for that.
Is she alive? Let me ask. Is she someone?
No,
okay, so she lived in the.
She lived in the 18th century.
In the 18th century.
And I died in her arms in 1777.
Okay.
And as I died, she said, "I will find you in the future.
Okay.
I will find you."
Yeah.
And eventually, I remembered past lives impacting all the way back to 1777.
With her help?
With her help, yes, because I was resistant. And also with the help of First Nations mentors and medicine people that I worked with over 30 years.
Yeah. And so in your mind you build this medicine wheel, which, you know, as we know, it's a circle with the 4 points.
That's right.
In the middle.
And then the center.
And in the very center, are you walking towards, is that the idea? Is that you are walking from
this is just the space where I communicate.
Yes.
And mostly listen.
Mostly listen.
Mostly listen.
Were you, you said you were resistant. How did you overcome that resistance? What happened that you listened finally?
Because she was always right.
She was always right. I love that. So right about you.
Even though I didn't understand,
Yeah.
she was always right. And I just thought, okay, no more resistance.
No more resistance. So she finally beat you down, eh?
Well, persuaded me to walk in the right direction. Let's call it that way.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to continue our conversation. We have to go to break. Please stay tuned, everyone, as we go to break and we continue our fascinating conversation with Dr. Ian Prattis. Hi everyone, and welcome back to The Author's Journey, a show that's dedicated to telling the stories of authors in our community and their journeys as they develop their crafts and bring their words out into the world. I'm your host, Mony Dojeiji, and I'm delighted to have with me today Dr. Ian Prattis. Welcome back, Ian.
Thank you.
Now, I want to talk about one of your books, which I think is the dream of many authors to have happen, is that their book becomes a movie, right? Congratulations,
Yes.
first of all.
Thank you.
Now, this book is called Redemption. Now, tell me a little bit about this particular book. What's it about?
Well, I wrote that book 45 years ago.
Okay.
And didn't know how to get published at that time, so I got a few rejections, and then I clean forgot about it.
And what was it about? What was the story of redemption? Whose redemption is it?
Well, it's not autobiographical, but it was allegorical of the mess I was in.
Yeah.
I was trying to save a marriage and
Yes.
also work on my career as a young professor at Carleton University. And I
Yes.
wasn't doing a very good job
Of both or either?
Neither.
Oh, dear.
So the thing is, in 2011, when I found the manuscript again, and I
Yes.
sat down on the basement floor and read through it, I just wondered, who on earth wrote this? Because how could I, 45 years ago, in a total mess, write a book like this?
As in, it was so good, like you were surprised by its clarity?
I didn't think I wrote it.
Oh, you didn't think you wrote it. Perhaps it was the muse that we were talking about earlier.
Maybe. But I also remember when I finished the manuscript 45 years ago, I said to a friend, this is going to be a movie.
45 years ago you said this?
Yeah, and I didn't think it would take 50 years or so. And I was very excited when I got a call from an executive producer who was very interested in it. Okay. This book I'd entered it into the Florida International Book Fair, and it got the gold medal for fiction.
Congratulations.
So he had a look at it and he thought this was worthwhile turning into a movie, and this is new territory for me. Yeah. I'm working with a screenplay writer, and this has proven to be really expansive for me, because this writer is very respectful of the book and of me, which I think is a bit of a surprise.
Why are you surprised by this?
Well, I'd heard so much about what screenwriters do, so,
yes.
But not in this case. Yeah. And he was showing me how certain parts of the book would not translate into the cinematic realm. So we would try and find alternative metaphors. Okay. And we're in the process of refining it, all the final tweaks before it then starts to go out to investors and people who will play in it. And one thing that is really, I think it's quite funny. The executive producer is two of his buddies are Shirley MacLaine and Ed Answer. Oh, and they got wind of this screenplay, and they wondered if they could have cameo roles. And I said,
Ed Asner and Shirley MacLaine?
That's right.
The Shirley MacLaine?
What a wonderful pair.
No kidding.
So I wrote in cameo roles for them.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And they have small parts.
But you know, this is, again, I come back to this is the dream of many authors, is to see their works translated into words that are then spoken cinematically, and that there is enough interest from individuals to actually go ahead and make the movie.
Yeah, I'm quite thrilled.
Yeah, I could imagine.
But for me, it's a learning curve.
How so? Because I imagine, you know, I think you're right. There's a lot of there are a lot of stories around screenwriters that as soon as you option your book, and this is what happened, I take it, correct? And the terminology is that you are selling the rights for this producer or this individual to create a movie from your book.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean that it will be a movie. The first step is to option it. Is that correct? Am I correct in understanding it?
I basically hire him.
Okay.
I still have the copyright.
Okay.
But the interesting thing was, in the book Redemption, I knew there was another one coming afterwards, so I left the ending quite ambiguous, which has no place on the screen. So he came back with a different kind of ending, which was a shocking ending. And so, you know how authors hang on to their books, and for about 10 seconds I resisted, then I thought, that's brilliant, let's do it. So the ending is quite dramatic, far more dramatic than in the book. So I'm going for it.
You're going for it.
Yes.
And you know, how has been this process? Because as you say, authors get attached to their words, because it takes a long time to get to the ideas that you want to say, and then to express them with clarity. And then when you finally see the product on the book, you go, yes, this is exactly what I want to say. And now all of a sudden someone is changing them.
Well, that's right. But I know the screenwriter I always saw as a fellow writer. And he showed me how certain things in my book would not translate too well to the screen.
As in visually, or how do you mean?
In terms of what would work cinematically, which I have no idea.
Right.
So the ending of the book, I'd left it quite ambiguous because I knew what the next book would be in the trilogy. Yeah. But it wouldn't work on a screen. So he came up with a finale that was shocking to me. You know how you love your prose and all the rest of it?
Yes.
So for about 10 seconds I was resisting it, then I thought, oh, that's brilliant. So, and it was.
Yeah.
So it's a much better, much more dramatic ending, which I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, come on. Well, we don't want to spoil the surprise, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And so you were confident then with the process. Well, first of all, I think it's wonderful that this screenwriter actually included you in this process.
Yeah, we have a weekly conference call, the executive producer, the screenwriter, and me.
Yeah.
And we're just three-way input into what's going into the screenplay.
That's fantastic, and I think it's heartening for authors to hear that not all screenwriters are what we imagine them to be, which is often they take your book and you're excluded from the process altogether, right?
Yeah.
And good luck with what actually ends up showing up on screen.
That's right. Well, they do say based on a novel by Ian Prattis, so it is based on.
Yeah.
So I accept their skills.
And are you seeing kind of cinematically how it's remaining loyal to your book, to the original story? Because it is loosely based on your life, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. And this is, for some reason, the screenwriter respected me as an author.
We'll take that as a good thing.
May it stay that way.
That's wonderful. And so now then, how long has this process taken? I'm just curious, from the time you optioned the book until the screenwriter, I guess, was hired? Is that what happens?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's 3 months into the process, so we're still early.
Yeah.
And I'm in no rush. Remember, 45 years ago I wrote this book, so it can wait a little bit longer. It doesn't matter to me.
That's terrific. And is this a Canadian company that's doing this for you? I'm just curious.
I'm hoping it will be a Canadian company.
Okay.
And it will be shot in Nova Scotia, so a Canadian author, Canadian province, and a Canadian production.
That's wonderful.
So that's the hope.
That's the hope. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that, and I wish you well, on that journey, because as I say, it is a completely different feeling to see your words now translated into images and having somebody tell the story orally. It's the oral tradition, right? Mm-hmm. Are you a fan of the oral tradition of storytelling?
Very much so. I think I've been very fortunate as a professional anthropologist to spend so much time with Aboriginal elders who would speak their creation stories in myths and poetry. And I really do think that if a culture doesn't have poetry, there's something missing. And I learned that from my Aboriginal mentors all across North America, and the way they would tell their stories and their myths and recount them, that this was vital. It was a vital part of how they were as human beings. And I think the essence of poetry in a culture defines it. So if a culture does not have poetry, it's not going to last very long.
Yeah.
The poetic threads are very, very deep, and that's what entwines, coheres, and manifests in ways that one can never anticipate.
Yeah. Those are very wise words. I'll take them to heart. For all the poets who are listening, to encourage them to keep to write, to not give up, even if it's just for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree.
What are you working on next? I mean, you've got the movie going on. I know you have a book coming up. We talked about this, the collection of essays that are coming up. That's you got your hands full going on.
Well, I think because I've brought out a lot of books over the last 4 or 5 years, I think I'm going to step back and study the greats.
Who are the greats for you?
Well, I'm thinking of short stories, so that's Alice Munro.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking of really investigating Hemingway, because I still think his book, The Old Man and the Sea, is so brilliant, because not one word is wasted. So I'm going to look at the greats and go back to school in a way, in terms of the writing craft. And so a good time out. Yeah. But I'll be busy.
You'll be busy. And I love the idea of you continually developing your craft. Even though you've published books, your book is being made into a movie, you're still developing yourself as a writer.
Oh yes, I think that will never stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to any writer who's embarking on the journey, or somebody who's actually still writing? What advice would you offer them as a writer?
I would encourage them to talk to other writers around them, because there's especially in Ottawa, there is such a rich talent
It's true.
of writers in this city. So get to know them, talk to them, go on retreats. I always learn something from retreats and also from listening to different genres.
Yeah.
So is communicate with others and always have other eyes on your work, not the eyes of your loved ones, because they're always going to think you're great.
Yes, they do actually.
So you need other
Yes.
critical eyes.
Yes.
And you don't take it personally. They're just trying to help you and sculpt your message or prose or poem into a more, what's the right word, deeper, authentic place.
Yes.
But it is to reach out to other writers,
Yeah.
and listen. And then they will start to listen to you.
Well, that's wonderful. I want to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and your journey with me. And thank you all for tuning in to this episode of The Author's Journey. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you on this next episode. Thank you.